Until April 15th. Tax season. Well, but I'm cooking for one.
It's just, did you do a crop top meal for you? Or paying?
I do 90% of the cooking.
Generally what we're doing is.
You don't have to cook for one.
I know. It's just like I don't have something sitting there. How they do it.
I get it.
When taxes roll around, she orders those factor meals.
Okay.
They're amazing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they get more.
Yeah, I hear you.
You know? From January until I made factor meals, factor you know? So I really sad. Yesterday I made 5 straight meals.
5? Why?
I gave one to my son. Last week I made a meal. This week I made a big meal for her. I made 2 double service class.
I've never even seen them. Did you?
Well, you know, there was a guy at the radio this summer, and he said, tell the age of his life, how much you skip. How are you? Or sticks in the
Well, it didn't stick at all, so I guess we're good.
You're pretty fresh.
Then they ran into Buffalo, known as Arizona. I'm up to 2 uncles and a father and sister.
That's it.
Oh, yeah.
We have all 4.
started, so hopefully we can, get out on time. The point of tonight's meeting is for us to, kind of package this up in its most current form, give it to the Board of Commissioners for you guys to review, and then I guess we'll have another meeting later on to go over some of the differences. I think that was based on our last meeting, what we were going to do for this evening. So, are you ready?
Ready.
Okay.
I'll share.
Excellent. If you just want to move the mic
Oh, I need to
closer
send
to
a
you.
request.
Oh, for the sharing.
I sent a request.
And if you want to move the mic closer. No.
Okay.
You're kind of.
Let's see if she can, they can hear her just fine first.
Okay.
Yeah, we discussed it. Farms go.
Okay. Okay, so a few things on this evening's agenda. We have, discussed possible changes to the proposed zoning map, and that is based on last month's meeting and input I received since that meeting. Possible changes to the principal wind energy facility overlay district map, discuss solar farms, solar arrays, and accessory solar uses. I have a couple of questions there on how you want to proceed with solar. And then going back to the second draft, which is the latest full draft of the ordinance, and looking at the proposed commercial 1, 2, and 3 district standards, and then the conservation subdivision design standards. So, I think the purpose of tonight's meeting primarily is to, for me anyway, to get some clarity on how to move forward with these pieces of the ordinance so that I can C1 as well. And now the question is, and let me back up for a second, these small parcels on Shine Hill Road would be C1 as well. And the question marks remain on these three large parcels. These two along 715, and then this other parcel along 611, which are adjacent to the proposed C2 district. Now, they are large parcels. So I think the question is, do you want these to be C1 or C2? I looked at what is on these parcels and the ownership. This one on the top is owned by the Broadhead Creek Regional Authority, and I believe it's just woodlands at this point.
They do have a water facility there.
Okay.
And I think the rest is pretty much deconnected.
All right.
I think that should be C1, you got neighborhoods up there, you got homes along that road.
Okay.
That's my opinion. I open it up.
C1's gonna be very restrictive though.
That's the point where we have to, yes.
I mean, 715 is known for commercial businesses.
What? The candle shop, which is a residential. Goose Corner.
That's in the residential, that's not safe.
I know, they didn't change that for any other reason, yeah. So that commercial thing is zoned R1. And the camp is C1, so I don't think anything's more egregious than the other.
When did we decide that Cherry Lane was gonna be C1? I still don't, I feel like that should be residential. It's not connected to 715, it's totally back in the woods here. It's away from the main road, and we're gonna be driving commercial traffic down there, and it also looks like there's a water course here that feeds down into the cranberry bog. Why did we decide, I still don't understand why that lot was made commercial, it doesn't make any sense.
I thought somebody said the owner had asked if they could be part of that when that was changed, but also there are supposedly some, garage repair shops and stuff like that up that way, if I remember right. I could be wrong.
Well, if they're over
I
there,
remember,
they're
like,
not conforming.
that,
As far as I know.
No repair shops.
there's none?
No, there's none there, but that was at one of the meetings, one of the dual meetings, because that C1 parcel was changed because the other portion of 715 right there is C1, and then initially, that's Cherry Lane Church Road. Across the street was also supposed to be C1 because that's the logging company.
Oh, yeah.
And it's an R1 zoning parcel now. So we were trying to conform to the existing businesses.
The only thing there next to the logging company is Carbonera's shop,
Yeah.
that's there.
So-
That's right next to the logging.
So that was changed, right? So it is commercial, it is C1, right?
Well, it's
Right
commercial
now.
now, there's no C1, we're deciding what we want it to be. I would like to see it return to residential, it's a residential neighborhood, it's not on the main road. It's, so again, there's like a water course there I can see here on the map. I don't know why we changed that to commercial, and potentially pollute the water course, and drive commercial traffic off onto Cherry Lane Church.
It's been that way for long before any of us were here.
No,
This is
that's
one
just
that Brian redid in last year.
Brian didn't redo it, Anthony Mullen came and announced. It came to the VOC. Anthony Mullen was looking at buying that, and because it was connected to the C district, he asked if it be C district.
I mean, I don't, so we're doing it because of one, we did it because of one specific property owner, isn't that illegal?
No, it's connected to
benefit
C1.
one.
It's not spot zoning, there's other C properties around it that were already existing.
Alright, well, I don't really see a good reason to do it, it's just gonna drive traffic onto Cherry Lane Church Road. It's gonna hurt property values around it, and again, it could pollute that water course, I think we should say residential, personally.
It is currently commercial.
could it go to residential if we're gonna be
No, it's
changing
already
it?
commercial.
Well, if we're gonna be changing it anyway, what's the difference between changing it from C to C1 or C to R1? I would prefer to see it go back to residential to
So the
protect the
question
neighborhood.
for this is, for the map, if it were to change the designation from a C to something else, does that require advertising and what, like, separate action than going from C1 to 3? So would that be a separate step in this map process, putting it back to residential versus us splitting? I guess my question
No, it
is
would
there a
just- I
difference
mean-
between C1 to 3 and then changing it from a C to residential?
Anytime, Jeremy, anytime you, like we're now talking about, what we have now is a large commercial district, just generically C district. You're dividing that up into C1, 2, and 3. That change in and of itself, because you're changing the types of use permitted on that property, would have to go through the map change process.
Okay.
The same would apply to the C1 tract, or tracts that we're looking at now. Even for that to go from a C to a C1 would need a map change. For it to go from a C1 to an R1 would have to go to a map change. So the map change component, that's why it's important we get the map
Okay.
in agreement, because we'll change the map all at once.
Okay.
So,
Leo, where's that, I think this liability
But,
rise up.
as a comprehensive update to the zoning ordinance, correct me if I'm wrong, the map would just be adopted along with the zoning
It
ordinance.
would be adopted along with the zoning ordinance, but the notices to everybody would be much more comprehensive. We want everybody to know that the zoning on their property is changing.
This parcel here, you say it was already commercial, what was it before, we're looking to make it C1, was it C2, was it C something else?
It was residential.
It was residential, so it was residential.
It was residential, and then the purchaser came in, approached the BOC and asked for it to be C1 since it was attached to C1 zoning already. It went through the BOC, got changed to commercial. My
Hearing, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Went through the hearing
And here's the
process.
thing, it's like, the developer has bought the property
Mhm.
based on it being commercial,
Yep.
so how can we just arbitrarily change it back to R1?
No.
Well, did he own the property when he came in and asked for it? Did
He
he
did.
buy the property and then realize, oh, actually, I would prefer this to be commercial? Or,
When did he buy it?
I don't know, but it
I
doesn't
mean,
matter.
again, I don't really
It
think
was
it
given,
matters.
he was
I
given the
think-
C district.
Well, we can't change it to residential if the man already has plans for it to be commercial.
Have we received any plans for that property?
Doesn't matter.
Yes, of course it
We-
matters. What are
we-
you
we-
talking about? Of course it matters.
It has to do with honor, Charles, something you might not know anything about.
Honor.
Yeah.
I'm looking out for the township residents.
And
live
we
on
are
Cherry
too.
Church Road.
We
I'm
are too.
deeply concerned about what this is going to do to the character of that neighborhood.
Which
Let's
is,
get our legal opinion on that, Leo, or Lisa.
Well, I mean, he could certainly argue against it, but if there's no plans filed, nothing prevents the township from changing the zoning to whatever it likes. If there's no plan, if there's plans pending, he's protected. He's protected. So I suspect once he gets wind of this, you'll see plans.
Mhm.
And then he can't do it. He's protected.
And also bear in mind that it is attached to an existing C1. So there's a C1 already existing in this immediate vicinity.
But the C1 isn't around Watercourse, it's not on Cherry Lane Church Road, it's on 715. It's on the main road, that's where the commercial district is, it tracks along 715. This one here is off of 715 entirely, it's back on Cherry Lane Church Road, it's gonna drive people off onto a smaller side road, off onto, I'm pretty sure this is a township road, right, Cherry Lane Church? Is that a county road or is that a township road? That's a township road, right? So now we're gonna be driving traffic off onto one of our township roads. It's gonna be putting wear and tear on the roads that we have to pay for versus the, 715. It's around the water course, it's feeding the bog. It does not make any sense that this would change to commercial. It should stay residential. It's going to make the property values around it, the residential around it. I mean, who knows what's gonna go there? A shopping center? I mean, that's crazy. Like, this is a a small residential neighborhood on a small township road. It shouldn't be commercial, it should be residential. That's just my position.
Well, the bigger perimeter is R1 around this property. There is a small line of C1, but the larger portion of the property is bordered by R1. To your point.
Can I ask, we don't know what's in C1, C2, and C3 yet, right?
Sure we do.
Well, it's been designated already?
No, but we know what C1 means, what C2
Well, no,
means.
I know, but you can't have like a solar farm in C1. You could have it in C3 maybe, but not in
No,
C1.
you can't even have it there.
Correct.
So, do we know those designations exactly yet?
We have,
Because if you can limit it to C1, because it's already commercial for the guy, you limit it to C1, right? Then he can only put in, well, like a camp, for example. He can't necessarily put in, a warehouse.
well, right now, looking at the list of uses, pretty much everything is allowed in all three districts. Like, the only things I saw that are in C3 that aren't in C1 are like kennels and things like that. So we don't really seem to have much delineation between what goes into the C1 bucket, C2 bucket, C3 bucket. There may be differences as far as buffers, but as far as like what can actually go there, I don't see much differentiation in the current list of uses there between the
I
three.
didn't have that.
It's more a difference of the size of the uses.
Hmm?
It's more of a difference in the size of the uses.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured, but it could be any kind of use. I mean, they could put a Walmart there as long as it was a tiny Walmart,
I didn't have a copy of that, so I didn't know that was already designated. That's why I was asking.
So what's the difference between R2 and commercial on C1? Like, what can you have here that you couldn't have in R2? Although that would be spot zoning, because there is no R2.
Yeah, that's probably why, because I know Molly, he does apartments, right? So he's probably trying to put like an apartment complex there.
So I gather this C1 designation will probably be something that you guys will want to.
Yeah, I don't wanna hang us all up tonight, we can look at it
That,
as a
I mean,
board,
this
but,
is,
yeah.
as it is a draft, that you guys then can
We can work on this.
adjust, so.
We can work on this.
I would do it as a C1,
Yeah, so I mean, whatever this ends up being, you guys can change however you see fit, so.
I could see the lowest impact because it's my
Right.
neighborhoods.
Absolutely. Okay,
Okay, so we'll come back to that with the commissioners.
yeah.
All right.
That would be good.
The camp, Lindemere, that's going to go to C1, correct?
Yeah.
So it's now commercial, it'll go C1, which allows camps.
Right.
Okay, now, back down to the Broadhead, property owned by Broadhead Creek Regional Authority, C1 on that one.
Yes.
That was
So
on here?
I think they were gonna allow trails on there, I thought. I don't know if anybody has that memory, but I thought they were gonna let us walk it.
Okay, then, on the other side of 715, the property adjoining the Broadhead Regional Authority property, the ownership on that shows as Coppelson Properties, and it's Coppelson, what?
Oh, that's the name.
He has a tentative PRD plan approved.
Okay. All right,
So,
so,
I would say C1, low impact, right? What it
Yeah.
has is.
That,
Yeah.
that fits.
C1,
Yes.
He was going to build a, shopping plaza and apartments,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, now 715's on for that one.
Does he have any land left?
I don't know.
Well, we'll see when they're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it doesn't seem like there's much
Well, is he gonna have enough land to do?
Well,
what he
that's,
wants to?
I believe
Right.
that was his concern 12 years ago when he first started this exercise, which was what is actually gonna be
He's
available.
gonna have to get scaled back.
Okay, so I think we're on C1 for those two properties.
C1 for those two. Now, moving up, 611. This other property.
Is that the
along
Haven property?
611. Since ownership showed up, I think it's Fritz, F-R-I-T-Z. So this is at the intersection of 715 and 611. It is really a wooded hillside, basically.
Mm.
Okay. This is also
And
Copeland,
probably
or?
most of that is Avenue Road.
Well,
It
actually,
looks like it is
I
Fritz.
I think Copeland might be this other C2.
It's two, right?
yeah, that, where your cursor is, that is Copeland.
That's Copeland.
Yeah, no,
And then
I don't
this
know what's
one
up there.
shows,
You say
this
that's
one,
Fritz?
the owner shows as Fritz.
On the first two.
And again, it's, the wooded hillside.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
There's nothing there that I can see. Now, it is in this, it has C2 zoning on the kind of, I guess, western side of 611 and just below it.
Okay. That will give you two.
So the question here is C1 or C2?
I'm curious, why isn't that R2? Because we have a little sliver of R2, C1 in the middle of it, and then R2 behind it.
This again, this is another one that was rezoned, last year to C.
Oh, that,
I'm not sure if it was it was probably R2 prior to that rezoning.
okay. So then, let's do this, let's add that to your list again, because that'll match the same as what was done with that other property. Because I don't think we're gonna be able to reconcile that this evening. That's okay.
Wait, what are we thinking, Bill?
That other piece that's next to R2, that was apparently rezoned last year. So rather than us attempt to reconcile that this evening, add that to the list for you guys to when you finalize the map.
Yeah.
Again, this is just in draft form, so by all means, you guys can, and I don't know that when we first did this map, I believe it was before any of those changes were
That's
done.
That's
So,
correct.
so by all means, whatever you guys decide to do with that will be fine.
611 in line with the
Yeah.
SC2.
So that, so we'll add, Nancy, if you just wanna add that, then as a discussion point, and I think that'll be.
Got it.
Okay, thank you.
Got it. Okay. All right. So the next, I need to get from you. Apparently, there was an R1 property that was rezoned to R2 at some point recently.
I just had a quick question. I know when we adjourned the last meeting, the ones on 715, the smaller ones, there's a house on one of those lots that was, put in, and I believe, it's zoned commercial, that there's a house on the lot, so like, and then we had discussed that we were gonna figure out, or try and figure out, why that was commercial versus residential, going up 715 there, those little lots.
I think in the
I'm sorry, yeah,
very
China.
Didn't know you're.
Well, there's nothing that says you can't put a house in a commercial.
No, right, but there was, when we discussed this at the last meeting with everybody, we were gonna try and figure out why they were changed to commercial.
I believe, I thought that was related to why that C1 parcel was changed, not the whole 715, that one piece that we already discussed is gonna be with them to reconcile. There's a piece that was changed to commercial, and a piece that was changed to commercial of 611 that is still in question.
So, I just remember.
So that I believe we already, your question is what we were just referring to a few minutes ago.
Right, but that was further up. This was actually, because this is down past, that's all residential right in there.
Mm-hmm.
And, you've got, I don't remember the road specifically, but it's all residential. It's basically right across from the, granite place. The,
That's Shine
Shine
Hill.
Hill Stone, on Shine Hill, that's what I'm talking about. I meant meant shine, no, I didn't mean 715.
These small ones
Okay.
here.
Yeah. And when we.
I don't know why they were rezoned to commercial. That was before, again, like before.
Was that part of the conversation with the homeowners in that area, and some of them wanted?
Well, Doug Steele's Hardware had a warehouse up there?
Yeah, but he's across from, Pennywise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they were given the option
This is
because
further
of
down.
the rezoning, weren't they?
They were all included.
Yeah, they were all
Yeah.
included in the hearing, and everybody was notified in that area before the hearing.
They were
And
picked
some
by
of
the
them
board.
wanted to
They were
be-
picked by the board, no, some of them were just.
Everybody had to be, I remember
Oh, yeah.
mailings had to go out, and they went out to everybody, and if you were interested in being part of that,
Yep, there was a hearing for sure.
Okay, next on the list of zoning map, possible zoning map changes, so Kyle, this one is, in your wheelhouse. So the, state game lands were expanded, were up on, near Camelback, I believe, yeah. Just north of Camelback, so I outlined it in red. So these two parcels have been added to the state game lands. The question is, do you want to rezone that now to the CD Conservation District?
Well, it would make sense if it's part of the game list.
So yes.
Part of the game list, can't do anything there anyway.
Alright. Next one, going over to the Cranberry Bog. So again, outlined in red are properties that are, these are owned by the Nature Conservancy, and there are one or two in here that are owned by the township. This is the area of the Cranberry Bog, it's all wetlands. The question was raised as to whether or not to rezone these to CD Conservation District. Notice that the yellow portion is currently R1, and the purple portion is currently your RD Recreation District. So it would change both of those areas to CD.
Would it be taking the existing Birchwood Resort though, and putting it into CD versus RD?
If that is located here, I don't know if there's any
I don't know where it goes that far out.
development
I
there.
can't read this, I'm just asking.
I'm not sure that, I'd have to look at the ownership of that parcel, that's part of the purple. And whether or not there are any structures there, I tend to doubt that there are, because I think that that is also boggy wetland area and undevelopable.
Natasha, I'm looking at the map right now, the, Conservation District owns all of the property up to where that ends, Birchwood begins. The ownership changes to the Castle Inc. or whoever owns it now.
Actually, yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. So, yeah, this is, that part in the purple is owned by the Nature Conservancy, because I did check the ownership on all of these.
Then if that's the case. then-
Yeah, so then you wouldn't be taking anything away from the current resort, yeah.
And what's the difference between the CD and the resort district then?
The CD, I think, doesn't allow any of that kind of development.
No development, but they allow cell towers.
wireless, which are the cell towers. According to our matrix, non-tower is permitted in the CD.
Right.
Small facilities are permitted in the CD. And then wireless communication facilities, tower-based, are permitted by way of special exception. So the answer to your question on wireless towers in the CD, yes.
And also in the RD?
RD, yes, the same.
Yeah.
Permitted, special exception, yes.
They're permitted everywhere except the R1 and R2, and there's special exception. So the conservation district is very limited in terms of what can be developed there, and on top of that, being that this is a wetland area, a large wetland area, I don't know that much would go there.
Can I ask a question? I know, eventually the cable companies are gonna be pushing these, I guess, these mini towers through along the way, along the plant. How is that gonna affect the R1 areas and stuff, and such?
Like the small wireless facilities, so there are small wireless communication facilities, and I believe they have to be permitted everywhere, according to the state. And that's the small broadband, like 5G connectivity devices.
Yeah, they put them on the cable, they put them along, you know, the plant. as it's
Right,
called.
yeah, so according to state, law, they have to, municipalities have to permit them everywhere.
Okay.
So do we have a yes or a no on the cranberry bog being rezoned to, the parcels making up, primarily making up the cranberry bog being rezoned to CD?
Are you sure there's no homes in there?
There, no, so these are all owned by Nature Conservancy and the township.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. All right. Okay, well, maybe two more. So another inquiry came up, regarding Kevin's Lane. So we're over here, right off of Warner Road.
Or it's circle?
So where it's circled red. So where it's circled red, that is Kevin's Lane. It's proposed to be included in the C3 district. It's currently C commercial.
It's residential, I don't know.
But
if
yeah,
it's
on
residential.
that street is a residential
Yeah.
street. So the question is, I think there was a request or a question as to whether or not the township could rezone that to residential.
I know they would like that, and I know Ruby Lane would also like to go back to residential. And I don't see any reason why they couldn't.
But how many parcels are on Kevin Lane? 2 or 3 houses?
There's more than that, yeah. Zoom in on the map here, there's quite a few.
I think there might be about 10 or 11. I'm not sure that they all have houses on them, but there are a number of houses on there, single family.
The majority of those houses along Kevin Lane are residential properties, obviously zone commercial. There are a few short-term rentals up and down that street. I know the one at the very top of the hill, that overlooks 80, that's a short-term rental. You do change it to a residential district, you'd be creating non-conformity. So you gotta take that into consideration.
Well, I certainly don't want it C3, because they got enough garbage going on over there.
Can you do that though for a couple parcels, considering that it's surrounded on all sides by C1, C2, and C3, and then you've got like
Yeah,
5
I
to 8
mean,
parcels that are R1?
It would be a little odd, I think, to have
Wouldn't
an
be spot
island
zoning,
of R one.
potentially?
I don't know that that would be spot zoning, Leo, I'd ask for your opinion on that. I tend to not think so, but I
I have no
defer to
problem
the
with-
solicitor on that.
I have no problem with doing it, you know, it's possible to be challenged, but they're already all developed as residentials, if that's what the people there want, like, I don't see a problem with doing it, and, you know, let somebody bring the challenge, if they wanna buy one of those houses and turn it into a commercial, whatever, but.
I was asking the questions just to make sure that we're covered, so,
Yeah.
maybe Leo can answer, please?
Yeah, I mean, it can be challenged. They're existing residential, I mean, you could make them residential, it would be a little awkward that you'd have a strip of residential. It's kind of like the C1 that we discussed at the top of the map, where there's discussion about making that back to residential. You know, you have this sort of C1, well, it's attached to another C1, but here it would just be an island. I mean, it could be challenged, someone buys up 3 or 4 lots and wants to try to do something commercially in there, they could challenge it. But, you know, I think until it's challenged, you certainly could do it.
So right now, I believe it's probably C1.
Probably C.
It's
You know,
C right now.
C, right. So I wouldn't change it unless you're gonna change it to residential myself. Because people live there, so it's not C3 and it's not whatever.
Is it existing commercial now?
It's residential now, and then, as
It's
Paul said,
it's
there are
developed
some.
as residential in a commercial district, which is.
Right.
So it's a commercial zone,
Yes,
Yes.
with houses in it.
Yeah,
And they bought the houses or built the houses in what was existing as a commercial zone.
I don't think so. I think it was residential back when they bought it and it's changed to commercial.
your commercial district allows residential in it.
Yeah.
Bear in mind.
Oh, yeah.
It has better buffers though, the residential district, like Core 5 wanted to expand closer to their houses somehow. Looking at, you know, what they're currently dealing with, you know, that being residential could potentially provide them a better buffer, correct? You know, with, how close they can build to the property line.
That area has been C1 since 1983. I know that from the research for Right to Know. So that has been a C district since 1983. And that whole area right there, encompassing Ruby Lane, Kevin's Lane, that whole section since 1983.
So, then maybe we can add this to the list, but a consideration, if it's a C now, and it's been a C for a while, and we're currently identifying C 1, 2, 3, then it may not be much of a jump to put it as a C1. Unless, if you don't wanna go to the residential route, doing a C1 would at least still be within the realm of the commercial and would tie in with this exercise we're doing, which was splitting the entire commercial into 3 areas, and then the reason we chose C1 is because of what's currently on those properties. Wouldn't affect the short-term rental, would give some limitations, wouldn't be residential, but would at least not make it C2 or C3, unless you guys wanna make it residential when you go through the map, which is fine too.
So
Now, if
what
we
if the
made it
people came in to
C1?
change it? What if the people came in to change it to R1? We would allow it, right? Or would we not allow it?
I guess the question is, what is trying to be accomplished? If you're trying to protect these homes, they're surrounded by commercial, you're not gonna protect them. There's nothing they can do, because in their backyard, they have commercial, the front, across the street, they have commercial, the side yards, they're an island here already. So if you're trying to protect them, whether they stay commercial or not, doesn't have any impact.
Well, it does.
You'd have to change the surrounding areas.
It does have impact, because right
Now,
next door, they
actually,
have something they don't want.
As C3, so if we change
Well,
them
they
to
could anyway, but
C3.
you're not changing, right next door, you're not changing, you mean, within
In
that.
the neighborhood.
Within that
In the
neighborhood.
neighborhood, they can
Somebody
have
could come in and
something.
buy 3 or 4 homes and put up a commercial use, yes.
Yeah.
And
that's
C,
what they
if we
want.
change them to C3, C3 does not permit residential uses. So if we change Kevin's Lane to C3, as is shown on the map now, they would become, as a residential use,
Not conforming.
they would become non-conforming. If we make it C1, it would be, so the existing pinkish area is C1, we could change
section, we can use a very specific example, kennels. That's an issue, some residents don't want to live next door to a kennel. With the way it exists now, kennels are permitted by way of special exception in the C district, hence, that's how the kennel existed. If you look at the proposed changes, kennels are not permitted in C1 or C2, but they are a special exception in C3. So again, it depends on the uses that you're looking to keep out.
So the kennel, when this is C1, becomes non-conforming.
Becomes non-conforming, and if they move out and it's discontinued, you'll never have a kennel there again, if it goes to C1. Or residential is not permitted either, but I'm saying if the object is to protect them from future development, I think you have to pay special attention to what's permitted in the proposed districts, and you'll see that kennels are not permitted in C1 or C2. That's a real life example.
So when
I
we
don't
did,
think they're looking to keep kennels out, I think they're looking to keep all commercial out, is what the reason they have.
But Joe, the problem is they're surrounded by commercial. So they can't keep it out unless the township wants to try to rezone those properties as a buffer to residential.
Okay.
but they have the option to come in if that's what they want, just like anybody else.
Right, right.
Okay, sorry, so what are
So
we doing?
I think we're landing on C1, not changing,
C1.
we're not changing it.
Leave it the way it is.
Well, change
Until the
it.
board meets.
Change it to
Right,
C1.
identify it as
C1.
C1.
Yeah.
The same with Ruby Lane, but I would add that to the list of the other ones, just,
Ruby Lane's already seen.
oh, is it, okay. And then just add that to the list for them to just make sure that,
Yeah, the commissioners will
Yes.
revisit it, yeah.
right.
Got it. Okay, last, item on the zoning map, are we doing anything with the Sanofi property? I think at the last meeting.
They came in to talk about it, but I don't believe that they came to us with any formal
Okay.
request to do anything zoning wise. It was merely, what would the process be, and they have not come to a future meeting.
Well, I think they're land tied, aren't they? With no access in or out. Or does it?
It was not their industrial, it was one of our,
Can you go to the Sanofi section?
I think it's this.
Aren't they industrial?
Yeah, Sanofi's
Okay,
industrial.
so
Property they wanted to.
Sanofi has a parcel, two parcels,
Yeah, it's
right
right
where
where
the
that.
R1 is.
Yes, right.
And the one can never have anything on it because it's got some kind of irrigation system or something.
It's a conservation easement.
Conservation easement. And then the next one down, they were filling out the board and the planning commission with regard to changing that to industrial for possibility of future down the road, then expanding their facility.
They don't have any access.
They don't have, they would cut, based on what Aaron was saying, they would look to cut a road around the perimeter to get down to the other parcel. For interior, internal,
They can always do a lot right here,
Move.
that way they're not
Right.
landlocked.
And that was, there was no formal request
As
at
of
our
yet.
last
Correct.
planning commission meeting. But we did mention we're currently going through this, and so I don't know if that will, produce them putting a request in. But they were just kind of, at least at the meeting, inquiring as to what that process would be.
because they're basically built out where they're at with their facility.
I don't see an issue with making that industrial.
Yeah, they already own it, but.
Don't they have like a conservation lien on it or something?
Well, a portion of, so yes, a portion of that property, regardless of what's in zone, can't be used. I think they wanted to be able to extend some of their property out and use that as some of the green space for the rest of their whole property. But some of that is, limited based on the deed, where they can't do anything with it anyway.
And I forget the property that they want to make industrial, is irrigation. And it's being fed by that conservation easement.
The one that is irrigation is already industrial.
I think it was their spray irrigation.
Yeah.
Understand.
Yeah.
I think they were interested in running a road through that.
I can't hear you.
They were interested in running a road through that spray irrigation piece, if I'm not mistaken.
They were talking about the possibility of it, but like Aaron said, there's no formal plans
Yeah.
yet, but they're just, I guess they were spitballing to see what the thought process was and taking the temperature of the township.
They haven't come back since our last planning commission meeting to make a formal request, so there was no formal request, at least the planning commission, based on that. It was merely just kind of a, what is the process, kind of question, so.
I would leave it as is then until they.
Yeah, I don't believe, yes, I don't believe that we have to make any change to that at this point, because they haven't made any formal request to do so. But if for some reason they come in while this is happening, then maybe that'll be a point of consideration, but I don't know what their timing is in relation to when you guys will have this finalized.
Okay, we'll leave as is for now. All right, moving on. Next up is the principal wind energy facility map. So this is the principal wind energy facility overlay district. At the last meeting, we discussed, so it is currently shown, proposed on the parcel that is the subject of the solar farm. And then the adjoining parcel above to the north, which is basically, at this point, a wooded mountainside. And so the question was whether or not we could kind of cut this upper parcel in half to limit the placement of the windmills so that they would not detract from the Pocono Manor Historic District. And so I took a look at this on a topo map, so I'm bringing that up now. And I recalled that we had also looked at these properties because we have written into the ordinance standards setbacks from the property lines. And I believe it might be a 1,000-foot setback. Now I can't remember the exact number. But what this is showing is that the area inside of the green is the area that is left, that is buildable once the setbacks are deducted. And this is right along the top, the ridge line of the mountain. I believe that's Bear Mountain. At least that's what it says on the topo map.
Where the old mill is, the flour mill is.
So if we were to, and in all likelihood, if a wind farm were to come here, which again, according to what conversations I had with the county, it was unlikely that that would happen, just because of the topography. It's not, this area doesn't score high in terms of what the wind farm operators are looking for when they're siting their facilities.
Good.
So, now did say that Camelback Mountain was like the only site where it would really be viable in terms of, what they look for. But, Camelback is the ski resort, and we need to allow them somewhere. So,
I would rather just allow them in the solar field as it exists today, not in the other property. I'm not for cutting down on the trees to put up. I thought it was attached.
I think we have to have, we had talked about this where it felt like we have to have more than one parcel zoned for the windmill facilities, the wind farms.
I said, if we're not gonna get them, let them challenge us, because if we're not gonna get them, it's not a challenge.
I'm not guaranteeing that you won't get them. I'm not saying that you won't get them. So what I was saying is that they would most likely locate on the ridge line, along the ridge line of the mountain, I would think, or, as close to the top as possible. If we cut this property in half in terms of the district, we could come right along that ridge line, and we'd really be reducing the amount of land available once you get, take the setbacks out. And so, there again, could the township be challenged as, a de facto exclusion, meaning on paper you say you are providing for them, but in reality, you can't build on there because of where you located them and what the setbacks are and so forth. So, it would provide for some of this area. So the line would basically come across, if you can see my cursor, right across here. And so you would be allowing that lower part of the green area. They could put wind turbines here. I think they would probably still be visible from Pocono Manor, because they're still toward, on the top of the crest of the mountain there.
Does that consider your 1,000-foot setback?
That considers 1,000-foot setback, yeah. So there would still be some area inside of the 1,000-foot setback. But they would still be up on the top of the mountain. So I think, probably your options are leave it as is, cut it in half, and see if you get an application and any kind of challenge, or take it out entirely and see if you get challenged.
Leave it alone.
But I think that if you take it out entirely, then, someone might come in with an application for another area in the township, and then you might be stuck with that area. Someone might come in with a windmill, wind turbine, wind farm somewhere else in the township, and now you might have to allow them in that area of the township.
So my understanding was that was two parcels and one of those trees, but now I'm understanding it's all the solar field. So it doesn't really matter, the trees are down.
This one is a solar field here.
So is the other one.
This one is not a solar field.
No, that's where the solar field is, I'm looking at that. That's all the
This
solar.
one was gonna be or was it that one that was gonna be the Blu-ray?
What was that?
There was another one that was coming in and they withdrew.
Yeah, that
Oh,
was,
that's-
that was on the side.
Yeah, that was.
Chrissy, would you pull your mic in? I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. I think, is that yours that's pointed away behind the monitor
It's
there?
hers.
Oh, you guys are sharing, oh.
Yeah. I misspoke, that, in the R1 is where the Blu-ray was going to go. But these two lots are both solar farm, I believe.
The lower right, I mean, this probably is dated now, I'm like looking on Google Maps or on the GIS. It doesn't look like there's anything in that lower right area. It's the top central area, that big green blob. That looks like that's all
The lower right is the hole going down Back Mountain Road.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I mean, all this time we've been going on the belief that this lower right is the solar field.
That's south of the power line.
That looks like it's also.
It's down that hole. Goes all the way, it goes down the backside of Back Mountain Road, it's nothing but a steep slope, and it's like a hole.
Yeah, that is a steep slope.
That's not a good place for. The top parts are slope.
Well, I mean, either way, it doesn't have much of a bearing on the wind farm. I mean, we could still zone that to be wind farm as well,
Sure.
and this lower right. So we'll stick with that?
I'm fine with that, just.
I'm fine.
Okay. Okay, speaking of solar, next on the agenda is the solar farm and solar arrays. So at the last meeting, we talked about this. I have a few questions, just so that I know how to proceed with the solar regulations. In the draft zoning ordinance update, we have the solar overlay district, which allows for utility scale commercial solar generation facilities like a solar farm. And then we have accessory solar facilities, which are permitted just about everywhere, I believe, so that a homeowner or a business or an industry can have their own accessory solar use that provides power to that principal use. They can sell the extra energy back to the grid, net metering. So we have that set up in the draft zoning update. Now, in the meantime, the township has amended its zoning to allow for solar arrays, and so I have the definition up here on screen. So a solar array is defined as a collection of solar panels or modules designed to capture sunlight and convert it into electricity. Solar arrays are permitted in the industrial district as a conditional use atop existing industrial buildings. So solar array atop industrial buildings, and then in the commercial district, solar arrays are permitted as a conditional use atop existing commercial buildings. Now, the question is that, my question is, are those solar arrays accessory? Is that the intent here, that they would be accessory to the industrial building or commercial building?
What would the difference be if they weren't?
So what I'm wondering is, if it's an accessory use, so if the solar array is an accessory use and is permitted for commercial and industrial buildings, do you also want accessory solar to be permitted in other areas, for residential, or in your recreation district, your R1 district, R2 district,
I
or
would say.
for houses that are in the commercial district? So do you want accessory solar permitted as it's drafted in the update, permitted anywhere? And it's rooftop and ground mounted, so someone could have a solar system on the roof of their house, or they can have a solar panel in their backyard.
Correct,
farm, which is what we're trying to do.
Right. Yeah.
And then putting a solar array either on the top of your house or like Northampton Community College has over the parking lot,
Yeah.
would be acceptable in any area. It sounds like that's what's currently in place, so then take what we currently have and apply it here, is what sounds like I'm hearing.
But I don't believe you could put it in your backyard unless it's on top of an impervious surface.
That wasn't part of it.
I think for the,
I don't even,
it
I
was,
don't see that.
it was for the commercial district.
Yeah, but not for
It
residential.
wasn't for residential.
No.
But for the commercial district and industrial, that's what we had discussed, was it had to be on top of the impervious surface.
Yep.
And on top of an existing building, those kinds of things.
Yeah, but if you wanna put a couple dozen panels on a rack in your backyard, go for it. It's not an impervious surface. It's not gonna change the drainage. Solar panels in your backyard is not gonna change any of the character of the soil.
Yeah, it does change the character of the soil, that's why you can't farm it after you have it.
It doesn't change the character, trust me, I've been doing this for a long time. Solar panels in your backyard, let the water run through, let the sun go through enough. You have groundhogs, you have all kinds of critters living under them. So that's why you can have it in your backyard as well as on top of your residential roof.
If you're gonna put it in your backyard, I would say we need to do some fencing, not necessarily a fence, but some hiding, because it's ugly.
Well, that's.
So we have that, in the draft ordinance update, there is a section that regulates accessory solar. So if somebody does put it in their backyard, I believe there's screening
Yeah.
and buffering and setbacks, it can't be right on the property line. So it does have those kinds of standards for both ground and roof mounted solar as an accessory use.
That fence.
See the compliance?
Well, we didn't have a rule, so yeah, it is.
Yeah.
We didn't have a rule.
So I'm thinking that we'll keep what you have now and add the section from the proposed zoning update on accessory that allows accessory township-wide. So anyone can have solar as an accessory use, providing energy to their house, for their business, for their school, for their
And
hospital.
I guess it's important to note the difference between a solar farm and a
Right.
solar array.
Right, solar
So
farm
then
sells
that's
right
where
there.
I think it might get to be a little confusing, because a solar array, yeah, like, is a solar array a solar farm on top of a roof? Or is
Well,
it just,
no.
or is it an accessory
It's
solar?
accessory solar.
Okay.
Solar farm sells directly to the grid.
Right.
And I guess, in wordsmithing, how would one define large scale? So if it's a large building and you're putting a collection of solar panels on a large building, would that still be a solar array? Or would that be, but if it's not designed for wholesale or retail sale,
Yeah.
then that would be the distinction, whether
Yes.
it's small or large.
Right, so the distinction is between, it's, for a solar farm is the principal use
Okay.
of the property, and it generates the energy and sells it all to
Okay.
To the grid,
the grid.
yes.
Could we say something like, a solar farm is where the solar panels are intended to, the energy generated, more than 50% of the energy generated is intended to be sold back to the grid? Could we say something like that? That way, it's clear that people can't be building like solar arrays in their backyard because they wanna be selling all that energy back,
Yeah, so in the draft of the update, accessory solar is defined such that the energy is used on site.
Entirely, because sometimes you're gonna generate a little bit extra. I think
Yeah,
you
it
should be able to
allows
sell
for-
a little bit back to the grid.
It
We just don't
allows
want-
for the excess to be sold back to the grid.
Okay. So
Or
the
a
excess
net
is-
metering arrangement with the utility provider, and that's between the landowner and the utility provider.
But we don't cap how much they can sell back.
I don't believe so.
The only reason I would wanna do that is because again, like doing enormous solar arrays and calling it a solar array when they're
Well,
really
so it's
trying to
limited.
sell, you know, a
We-
significant, a majority of what
But-
they're doing.
Yeah, so
you
the
know.
accessory also limits the size.
It does limit the size.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
so I think we're covered with that.
Okay,
To address some of the other concerns.
Just a comment, you could just eliminate it just by saying, the output, the wattage output, and going below a threshold and above a threshold.
Well, I think if you did that, it would affect based on the building design. So if it was in a commercial, what we're trying to do is have the language apply, whether it's on your home or whether it's on a large commercial building, which would be different. But if you're limited in selling the excess back, then your primary use would have to be to power whatever it is, whether it's the large commercial building or your house, and the excess could go back. Then if it was the reverse, that would be defined as a solar farm based on what Nancy said.
All things being equal, you can only generate so much electricity at a certain given size right now.
Right.
So if you limit it on the wattage and say, okay, let's say a typical house or even a large house, might have 100 panels.
Sometimes though, when we get too detailed, that can also create problems.
Yep.
Because that provides an area for people to, take words and now.
If you cut it too close to the line, yeah, I would agree.
Yeah,
But
so
you know,
I-
there's gonna be a break point mathematically is what I'm
Right.
saying. Now, how many panels it would take to support X amount of output, and then that threshold being something more for commercial
Then-
use and selling back to the grid, rather than just powering my house. And I think you could find that in the science of the panel.
Yes,
The issue with that would be is if they do have batteries or something of that nature, what is stopping them from storing a significant amount of power on that
I'm talking
property?
about the output of the panels.
Yeah, so the output of the panel, they store it in batteries,
Right.
then you'd be restricting how much they could actually store, even though they're not.
Battery
set.
is, I think, a separate subject from the panels, although you may find some people do have battery storage on the panels, maybe yes, maybe no, depending on how much money they wanted to spend. It could be just an auxiliary, thing, but I'm just saying, there could be a scientific
I
breakpoint.
think we've.
The majority,
Pretty deep.
they would have to comply with impervious coverage requirements as well and setbacks, so they would be limited to how much they
I
could
think
actually.
based on what Nancy's saying, there's enough around it that would prevent those kinds of things from happening based on what else would apply. So I
The
think.
definition difference is weak.
I don't think that's the full plan, so,
Alright.
thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, so now for solar farms, a question, that I have is, so the solar farms, which are the utility scale, sell all the energy to the grid, are permitted in the industrial district by conditional use. So, where does that leave the, current solar farms? Is it built or it's in development now?
Almost completely.
Okay, so that, I'm just gonna go back to this wind map. So the current solar farm is on, let's say, this larger parcel here. Are we allowing solar there as well, or only in the industrial district? In which case, I guess this solar farm would be a non-conforming use, a solar use in the RD district.
From what I
Is that
remember,
what's happening?
we're allowing solar on existing structures, or if you're gonna build a new structure, you can put it on the roof.
She's talking about the solar farm that's already there, and
The solar farm is already there,
if you don't, so you're basically saying if it's not zoned industrial, it'll be non-conforming, and then,
Right.
Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but non-conforming, you can expand up to how many percent? 50%, so we would make it non-conforming right off the rip, and they could just pretty much expand a lot, right?
I would have to take a look at how they define expanding, because it's not necessarily always the square footage, it may be the actual type of use, so if they produce more power, that may be additional non-conforming as well. I'd have to take a look at that, but they are restricting the amount they can
But now, my question is, with the existing zoning that you have, solar farms are permitted in the industrial district, so the purple area, the dark purple area on the map where Sanofi is. So that's the only area right now that solar farms are permitted.
Why would we overlay it on there and where it already is?
So that's the question, do you want to overlay it
It's already
on
there.
the industrial district and where the existing solar farm is?
Well,
Or-
it's already, I mean, the solar farm's already there,
Right,
so I mean, it would make sense to.
to overlay it there.
Yes.
And then not,
Right.
I'm sorry?
It's-
I'd say yes, and regulate it.
Yeah, and then, do you then not want to have any solar overlay in the C3 district? So it'd just be industrial and the current existing solar farm.
I
Makes
personally,
sense.
I don't see any reason to change it, because frankly, I'd like Port 5 to walk back to something less intensive like a solar farm. You know, if they were to decide to, after they cleared all those trees, to put panels instead of a giant warehouse, I think that that would be better. So, you know, personally, I think it'd be fine to leave it the way it is. But, you know, people really don't want them there, you know, I guess, but I just think it's better than what's currently there, so.
I don't think we should put in more areas than we need. And if we
Right.
have the industrial and we're gonna do the overlay on the existing, we have 2 areas in 2 different zoning districts, let's not allow more than we need.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a problem either way. I think old people would keep an eye out and have a 4 or 5 there.
Okay. Moving on to the commercial districts, the proposed C1, C2, and C3 districts. So let me get there, bear with me for 1 second, I have to move all these things around my screen.
So I think this would be for this is what we're looking at?
Yes, no. We're looking at the actual, I am in the draft number 2 of the proposed zoning ordinance. I'm on page 60, which are the lot yard and height requirements for the C1 district. I'm also going to have us take a look at the map, the zoning map, just to see where the C1, proposed C1 district
So,
is.
What page?
60. So the proposed C1 district runs from the northern township boundary line along 611 down into the central part of the township, where it then transitions to C2 and C3. Oops. And then it continues out of the township along 611 to the south. And then we also have a couple of C1 areas along 715 that we've looked at, and along, what is this road here? Sullivan Trail. So the C1 district, we had talked about this, it's intended to allow for smaller commercial uses. It includes single-family residential use. And it's the transition area as people enter Pocono Township along those main arteries. It's like your smaller commercial uses, single 3 does not allow any residential.
So I have a question. In R1, I believe you need 2 acres to put a house up, but in C1, you only need 1 acre.
Right.
Do we wanna do that? Make them different?
Are we changing the R1 to 1 acre? Wasn't that proposed?
No, the R1 is still 2 acres. If they do a conservation subdivision design, it's still, and we'll get to that, you would still calculate the number of homes you get based on 2 acres, but then they can be on a 1 acre lot so that the other land can be open space. So for the C1, and we're not changing that, in your commercial district now, the minimum lot area is 1 acre. So that's not
We
proposed to
discussed that,
change.
didn't we, about the R1 zoning down to 1 acre instead of 2?
I don't remember that.
That may have come up.
Maybe with that, certain development, because you're kind of cluster housing.
Right.
There was, when we first met as a group, and this was a while ago, the conservation design was a topic of discussion, and I believe in that discussion, there was a lot of question about how that works in relation, because it's something very new, and that may have been part of that discussion, because I think when we get to that, that's something that the commissioners are really gonna have to deal with, because the planning commission, I think we spent a meeting or two, and Ellen, you may have been there, and I think it really comes down to whether you guys at the Board of Commissioners want to go with the conservation design. We did that project because of the grant that paid for it, but my understanding is the grant indicated that you had to at least do the exercise, but you didn't actually have to adopt it.
Right.
So the planning commission did the exercise, you guys at the Board of Commissioners then can decide whether you want to allow that or not. And I believe at the time there was some discussion as to whether or not that is something that at the time we wanted to look at.
I'd like to see residential go down, R1 go down to 1 acre. I mean, with the sewer system expanding, there's great opportunities to build single family homes. You got a housing shortage here in Monroe County. I mean, great way to, get some single family homes up, especially since it's really hard to build, anything with a septic on 1 acre.
There's a lot of non-conforming lots already,
Yeah,
that
there
are
are.
less than 2 acres, so they're unbuildable.
Yeah, no, I mean, mine isn't, the one, a few of the properties adjacent to mine are like tiny little lots. that,
Oh,
you
Laurel
know,
Lake has a lot.
Oh, yeah,
A
like
lot.
these houses are like falling into disrepair, they'll never get built back up unless, they gotta fight to do anything on them, you know?
And I think that was some.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, can we put the R1 discussion on hold and do the C districts? I mean, I know they're kind of related, if you're talking about comparing minimum lot sizes. So right now, R1 is 2 acre, I believe R2 is 1 acre. And your C district is 1 acre. So in the C1, we're not proposing to change that, we're saying minimum lot size for anything, whether it's a residential use or a commercial use, is 1 acre.
But you still have to, then your building would be
Right, and so,
adjusted based on the size of the property that you have.
right, maximum building coverage is 40%, and I'm bringing this up because we had some discussion about these percentages, earlier on when the commissioners and the planning
Yes.
commission started to meet. So I just wanna make sure we're on the same page here, and if not, this will be something to discuss further with the commissioners.
What's the current percentage of maximum building coverage?
It is 40%, so we're not proposing to change that. The proposed change was to reduce the impervious coverage from 80% to 60%. For residential, it's 35, so residential in the C1 district and currently in your C district, it's a 1 acre minimum lot area, 35% impervious cover. Right.
requirements on the SAL though. So if you reduce that impervious coverage, aren't you now severely limiting development in C1?
You are limiting, yeah, I mean, you're limiting the impervious.
Yeah.
It should still work with it depends on the use though, and what the parking regulations are for the different uses. But you are limiting, yeah, so by limiting the impervious, if you can't fit the parking that you need, you have to shrink your building size. So that's a question as to whether or not you want to do that. I think the reason was to limit the appearance of just a sea of paving along 611 and 715, and also given the environmental, in fact, the whole township is exceptional value and high quality streams. And so here it was just, if we can limit the impervious and limit the runoff, then let's do it. But it is going to impact the development. It could impact the development, again, depending on the use and how much parking they need. And so they might, an applicant might have to get a variance for some relief on the impervious cover, or reduce their building size, which they won't want to do,
And the impervious now
or
is
reduce
80%?
their parking.
The
Sorry,
impervious now is 80%?
now it's 80% in the C district, the entire C district.
So I mean, there's requirements though, stormwater management and those kinds of things, so I personally think if you reduce that by that dramatic amount, you're severely limiting your C1 corridor.
I mean, I think that's kind of the point, that this is supposed to be a less intensive area, when you move into C2, that's where stuff is clustered
Yeah, but
closer
if you get
together,
built in
it's
it,
denser,
then-
it's more built out, but out in the C1, it's supposed to be like, you're driving through the woods, imagine you're driving through the Poconos, imagine that. I think that's the idea.
And that's when and I think Mike, you were probably there at the time, when we first discussed shifting to a C123, we had all these same conversations,
Yep.
and I don't know that we ever were able to really get on the same.
Well, we
because
actually made a list.
Yeah.
We made a list of the least offensive, the mildly offensive, and the most offensive. Amy's smiling because she remembers this. And we made a list, and we said, okay, the least offensive is C1, mildly offensive is C2, and the really offensive is C3. And that's how, this was over 2 years ago we did this.
Right.
And,
So, I think maybe then, I think you guys at the commissioner's level are gonna need a little bit more time to digest those changes and see if those are still, because again, it was quite a while ago that we were probably last in this, to kind of digest whether that's still the number that we need, or if that should be changed in any way. But I think a lot of that was based on shifting from commercial to C123,
Right.
and some of the changes that went along with that.
Just to go back to 1 and 2 acre minimums. If I'm not mistaken, it became a 2 acre minimum, so you had more room for a backup septic system, right? So, I think going back to the 1 acre minimum is like putting a cart before the horse, because we're still a long way off from having sewer everywhere everyone thinks they're gonna have sewer. Things should just be left alone and good. And as sewer is put in, then you can roll it back.
And maybe that's why in commercial, where it's located, maybe those are more in line with where sewer is available, which might be why there would be the 1 acre. So that might be why there is that difference.
I don't even have a half acre.
So I'm saying you're limiting, you're severely limiting
Yeah,
everything.
0.43.
I prefer to plan for the future, we don't want to do a zoning change every time we expand the sewer system.
Right.
We already have a
That-
neighborhood distribution going for lots, so it's silly stuff. 2 acres is not that, I go for 5 acres.
I couldn't afford 2 acres, not folks money.
But I think, so for that, I think what we'll do is add that to the list for you
Yeah,
guys.
yeah.
I mean, I think, so you guys have time to kind of digest that and see thoughts are with what may apply and what other things may not.
Okay, so Board of Commissioners to decide on the impervious. And while you're at it, you can also look at the yard requirements. So just down, let me zoom in here in case anyone's looking on the screen. So the front yard depth, right now it's a maximum of 75 feet. These should have strikeouts through them, sorry. So the idea here was to make the front yard a minimum of 15 feet. So that would pull the buildings up closer to the street. So again, I think it was the idea of when you drive down 611, in many cases, the parking is in the front and you see cars parked, parking lots in the front of the buildings. The idea here is to put the buildings toward the front of the street view and then parking on the side and the rear. So if you make the minimum 15 feet, then the building needs to be 15 feet, maximum 25 feet. So the maximum it can go back from the street is 25 feet. So you're basically pulling the buildings closer up to the street, and then there are also requirements for landscaping, just to try to, make this street view more appealing. So that's what those changes are intended to do. Right now, the setback is a maximum of 75 feet, so buildings can go all the way back as far as 75 feet up of the street, and that's when you get the parking and paving in the front.
Can I ask a question, quick?
Yes.
If you move these buildings up closer to, our commercial district is basically along 611. If the state was to come through and expand 611 and add another lane, and you've got all these buildings up closer, where do they?
So they
How
have,
does this
it would
happen?
be from their right of way, so they would be able to expand into their right of way. So it's from the
But this-
right of way is where.
Does their right of way expand once they've expanded? So let's say they put 2 lanes out on 611, and they cut into somebody's parking lot. And then does their right of way now expand further into that, towards that building that's now there? So that they can come in domain?
Like Steels.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
they had like almost nothing left.
Right,
in front anyway.
exactly. So if they put an extra lane in there, the road can be right up to Steele's front door, and then if they have, for whatever reason, I don't know, you were using Steele's as the example, let's say they wanted to put a road there, and they wanted to give it a turn lane, now are they gonna eminent domain Steele's hardware? To do it, so that would be the question that I would have on that. I would be really against that, especially with the traffic that we're getting from here. I mean, that's my.
Well, that, and at the time, when we first went over this, there wasn't talk of a study
Right.
of 611, but that's, they did that with the bank that was on the corner, 611, 17, it's turning from that.
Right.
And there
So,
is
that
expansion
may be,
work.
that may be something, although we could have buildings that are currently there that could have an issue.
I'd be worried about pushing all those buildings further up to 611 because you've got
611 may
noise.
be going back to them.
No, what I'm saying though, it's like if you're
Yeah.
forcing the buildings to be basically right on 611, what about noise and traffic and tractor trailers and everything that goes down 611? I mean, I have a business that I literally have a buffer of this big between the curb and the front of our building, and it is so loud. It is so loud. So I would be very concerned about doing that because I think that it's not gonna be conducive for a lot of businesses.
I disagree 100%. I mean, you want your business up near the road. That's why
I
so
don't.
many of these businesses don't want frontage trees. They want to be near the road.
Where they're gonna park.
Well, but I think a point though is how, there's now a study happening of the 611 corridor.
I think we should be doing everything everything in our power to keep them from adding more lanes to 611. The last thing we want is
But
a
even if
a
we-
4-lane
but-
road next to a 4-lane road right along the gate.
But unfortunately, as we've learned the hard way, a lot of things that PennDOT permits, for example, the apartment complex that's on the corner of Scotland Drive, the township doesn't want more traffic on the township road, but PennDOT required that.
No,
And so
but we
if
should
they
be
wanna-
looking at alternatives.
If they wanna widen the road, PennDOT's gonna widen the road.
Yeah.
They're gonna, they
And they will
remove the
take
bank.
what they want.
Yes.
Yeah, they'll take whatever they want.
Yeah, unfortunately,
And the chapel.
if
They took
that's-
more than they should have.
which is unfortunate,
They can pay me for it all day.
And the other thing is.
But that's the
too,
unfortunate part.
As the, buildings come closer to the road, it's harder for people to pull in and pull out, especially if you got, big trucks pulling in there. Because your property's only so big, you only have such a certain size entrance to your property. And if the trucks as it is, they go all the way to the center lane and come across as it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we should be like expanding the sidewalks, working on public transportation in the township to try to get people from driving to these businesses and getting them to take the Pocono Pony, especially with the tourists and stuff that are coming into the community.
Right.
We try and funnel them that way rather than getting them driving in and pulling them.
But we're not doing this for tourists, we're doing this for Pocono Township taxpayers.
Yeah.
So that's the board of
That's
budget
what
level.
alleviates the traffic on the taxpayers.
That's never.
But I think though, a point that when we first did this, we weren't really looking at, which is they could potentially be widening 611, so.
Again,
Not that we have to-
I think we should be signaling to the county that we
But-
don't want that, but.
we don't have
It's not
consent.
even the county, it's the state.
Well, the
So-
state too, I mean, everyone.
But
We can sit here and
unfortunately-
resign, well, it's gonna happen. Or we can
Yeah,
act-
well, that's the way it works.
Unfortunately,
PennDOT does what they want.
we don't have the ability to dictate to the state.
No, we don't, but we have the ability to set the standard and say, well, the state, sorry, you gotta come in and work with us.
Well,
I think we
they'll,
can beat us
what
with
they'll
that.
do is say, here's what we want.
You don't get it.
This
You don't
is-
get it, man. You can't stop PennDOT.
Watch
Yeah, oh, okay, yeah, watch you, yeah, you'll have us all,
I'll make you a bet. If
riding
I
some
come in and
transportation.
destroying the cemetery, the chapel, the cornerstones,
I'm hearing.
they already took the parking lot from the church years ago for their turning lanes. Now they're taking half of the cemetery parking lot for the bridge. Now they're going around the back of the chapel and taking the land all the way over to the entrance.
Yeah.
That's the only entrance into that cemetery. The other side by the crossings is all graves.
Yeah.
So I wanna see you stop them from destroying what's going on over there.
I think those plans are already ongoing, but that doesn't mean we can't
But
take
where
action.
were you when I was
that.
over there fighting with them?
I'm
When they
sure.
put the telephone poles in the middle of the parking lot when they weren't supposed to. I didn't get any help from Brown or anybody else. I had Belvin there, their managers, to tell them they destroyed that parking lot. You can't get a truck in there for a vault. You can't have more than 3 cars in there for a funeral. You got a big truck, forget it. My grandson was over there today. He almost hit the pole because he couldn't turn around his truck.
I'm here
So
now,
where
let's
were
solve
you?
it, see what we can do.
Yeah.
Let's see what
Right.
we can do.
Right, almost there. I'm sorry, it's very disturbing.
I
I'm
completely
playing them for
understand
2
that.
years.
Hope we can.
They do what they want.
And unfortunately, I think we've learned the hard way that PennDOT
Yep.
has their set of standards and regulations that they go by, and unfortunately, that's what they
That's what
do.
they do.
I think we've got some state representatives who need,
So, what I'm hearing is keep it at 75 feet is.
I
is what
think,
I'm hearing,
based
majority
on,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah, that we would keep things, not really want to change it at this point.
Okay, so the other yard, the side yard, rear yard, these other measurements, dimensions, we're not proposing to change them. We're just clarifying that these are minimums, which is why you see minimum underlined here. So this is no change from your current ordinance. In the C1 district,
C,
Proposed C three.
it's that
That
bottom.
brown.
That bottom brown part?
Yep,
Yeah,
there
right
you go.
there, yeah, that's it.
Okay, the C two district, I think we're going to have, okay, C two district, this is on page 61. 1 acre minimum lot area, that stays the same. Maximum impervious coverage, again, a reduction, this from 80 to 65%. So, I think we said the commissioners were going to
Yeah, I think,
evaluate the C1 impervious, right?
I think
So,
for C one, two, and
2 and 3,
three would be the same, only because I
Yeah.
believe there were different numbers for those.
right, so.
Based on them being C one, two, and three.
C1, 2, and 3, front
Yeah.
yard depth,
Mhm.
same, there's a change there proposed. And building height would stay the same at 50 feet. So no other proposed changes for C2 other than impervious and the front yard. And then for C3, 1 acre minimum lot, impervious cover. No, I'm not sure if we changed that one. I'll take a look at that. It says 65, oh no, 65. We didn't have a right. Although the C district is 80%. I think that this C3 would be a change from 80 to 65. Because it's currently zone C, which I think is an 80% impervious. Okay, so.
Yeah, I would add all three of those Cs to,
Yeah, front yard 75, height 50, so in the C3 district,
and then,
it's just a percentage of impervious. And I think that does it for the C districts, except for the map, so back to the map. When we had talked about the C 1, 2, and 3 districts before looking at the zoning map, when we met earlier on in joint sessions, there was discussion about these larger parcels, like where Great Wolf is, Great Wolf Lodge, around that area, that are proposed C1, and there was some discussion as to whether or not those larger parcels should be included in C2 instead of C1. Because again, the intent of the C2 district is for more regional scale uses.
We consider something like Great Wolf to be C2, not C3. And I know there's not much differentiation in there, but like, that seems like it's a pretty, large scale use of water parks.
I think it should be C2.
C2.
Basically, it's a hotel.
Yeah, well, that's
A
already.
hotel, water park is,
Most of them were in the resort district or recreational district.
Right.
So C1 is already a stretch.
There are other larger properties in the vicinity too, so I think these, hard to see on that screen, sorry. So there are some on the eastern side of 611, that's Herring Way, in the vicinity of Herring Way, but I think mainly these here, right where the I-80 interchange is.
What are the other big properties? Do we have any, parcel map?
Ah.
Where are we at?
think that all falls under the same discussion when we changed from C to C1 to 3. That is what kind of, I think we went.
Isn't that Bee Havens?
Yeah, that's gonna be a shopping
That's gonna be a shop, right?
Yeah.
That's what everybody's assuming.
That's what everybody assumes.
Yeah.
That won't happen until all the high density residential gets built.
No, Pennywise is actually down, no, there's no reason why.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pennywise is like 10 acres.
7.8, and I have little parcels too.
So that might be something for a session with the commissioners to actually
To break up that
get the
C1,
map out and
yes. Mhm.
draw the boundary of the C two.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll figure out what the exact boundary would be. Go back to this one. Share. Okay. All right, I think that does it for the map and the commercial districts. So moving on. We're getting there. Okay, the conservation subdivision design standards. So let me go back to draft 2 of the zoning ordinance update proposed. Let me find where that is. 207, Page 203 according to Amy. And, yes, 203.
Just to preface this again, we were first exposed to this because the grant that funded some of it, so that's where it came from, but I believe as of the very first joint meeting we had, there was a lot of questions and concern about whether or not conservation subdivision design is something that we should, at this point, be looking at doing in the township, because I believe it would then have eliminated something else that we may have wanted to keep, like there were.
The
going to
PRD.
be- Okay.
I mean, it
Because then there would
doesn't
be-
have to eliminate the PRD, but the idea of it with the grant too was that this would replace the PRD in some respect.
But isn't this a lot more restrictive than the PRD requirements?
So PRD often, I'd have to look again at what your PRD sometimes permit commercial uses as well. I don't know
think
that yours does.
No.
So this would be less dense than your I'd have to look at that too. I think that it would be less density than your PRD.
I think that when you probably were at some of the meetings when we discussed this, it was, I think it was quite a few meetings that we, yeah.
It was the set aside 50%.
And then I think there was a discussion about whether or not if you had a lake on that property, does that count as part of it?
Right.
Does it not count?
Right, so the
Right.
conservation design, it would be permitted in the R1, R2, and RD districts. And so,
Nancy, I think first though,
yeah,
the commissioners should decide whether we want to continue with the conservation subdivision.
right, so I was
Sounded like in the
just to
first
give
meeting.
an explanation
Okay.
that you take what the current district allows. So for example, in the R1 district, the minimum lot area is 2 acres. So if you have a piece of and it requires 50% open space, plus the environmental constraints on that property
Didn't you have to set aside a certain amount first of open space before
No,
you do the
that comes after,
calculations?
that comes after the calculation. So the environmental constraints come out. Now, you have 80 acres left, 40 housing units. Instead of putting them on 2-acre lots, taking up all 80 net acres, you put them on 1-acre lots. So now they take up 40 acres,
60% of your land.
and the other 40 acres are in the open space. So that's how it works. So it's basically like a cluster development with 50% of the net required for open space, so you're getting
I think that was
50% plus the environmental
that was a lot.
constraints.
And it was the net, and I think when we were talking about it, there was discussion, well, could the constrained area be part of that open space? But I believe the intent was the open space has to be accessible. Like,
Yeah, so the constrained area is part of the open space, but you have the 50% of the net is unconstrained, and therefore it's usable land for that community. And often, and the way it's written too for these developments is that 50% open space, it's not necessarily here are your houses and here are your open space. The open space is mixed in with the houses so that you get, nice, pretty, developments with houses looking out over the open space and.
I think the concern was in your example, you had a 100-acre property and you can only use 40 acres of the 60 you're not allowed to do anything.
So you're severely
No
limited.
developer.
Yeah, so the developer, they still get the same number of houses that they would get under, if they just lotted it out conventional. So the idea of it is that the developer
If you took
doesn't.
100 acres, you did 100 acres and subdivided it into 2-acre lots to meet our zoning, you would get 50 houses.
On paper, but when a developer draws up a subdivision plan, not all of, if there are 20 acres, they can't build on that 20 acres. So they're going to lose.
How, but why are
They're
you
not
saying
going-
you
they're
can't
not
build on
necess-
20 acres?
They're not necessarily going to get 50 houses. They might get,
But if, let's say the land is perfect.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, that would be
perfect.
different. If the land was perfect, it would be 50-50. The 20 acres in her example was constrained that would not be built.
so the land is perfect and unconstrained. Let me just take this example. So you have 100 acres of flat farmland, no constraints. With conservation design, there are no net outs, so it's 100 divided by 2, you get 50 units. On a conventional design, they put the roads in and whatever, and they might not get 50 units by the time they put all that in.
Yeah, but
With the
there's a lot more
conservation
restrictions in this too.
Yeah, there are.
There's a lot more restrictions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot more like design restrictions because they're trying to make it, like I said, like a attractive community with, you have to have so much of that open space has to be in like the common green area in the neighborhood. You have to have so many houses that are around the pieces of the open space. So it is like
It's restrictions.
more
It's
stuff.
restrictions.
Not to mention, we have so many waterways up here and so much,
Yeah.
there's not the possibility for it to be able to be done slim.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to promote it, so
No.
don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to sell this on any of you, I'm just trying to make sure you understand how it's supposed to work and how it works so that you can decide if you want it or not.
I like the 50%, because I don't wanna see the township turn into like New Jersey suburbs. I like having the green spaces between. You have to think, it's
You
one
said you
developer
wanted
buying and
1 acre
building, but
lots.
it's not going to be one person living there. It's going to be, potentially dozens, hundreds of people living in these communities. They don't all wanna be stacked on top of each other. They wanna be spread apart. So yeah, it's inconvenient to the developer if they have to set aside 50% of the space. But it's good for the residents once they move in because it makes it so that they're living in, the woods, which is what a lot of people move out here want, frankly.
It's just gonna drive the price of the houses up because you're only gonna be able to fit so much in there with that,
The price of the houses are already through the roof right
They're
now.
gonna be higher.
But we wanna see them, come down, which is why I'm talking about expanding the sewer system, which is why I think we should bring that building home down to 1 acre. That's what's going to, improve prices.
So you said you don't want houses stacked on top of each other and you want green space, but you want it reduced to 1 acre instead of 2.
Yeah, so you can look across the street and see, you know, the property across the street isn't built on, you know, not every property has to be built on.
Just, so, if you, John, I think you had some comments.
No, I just wanted to make 2 comments. One, if you do have that 20% restricted open space, first of all, it's never symmetrical, it's, you know, here, there, and everywhere. But that's allowed to be in a lot. You can have an acre of restricted open space on a 2-acre lot. They just can't build their house there. They can't put their sometimes they can put their driveway through it. But the point is, just because you have 20 acres of steep slopes or wetland or something, that doesn't mean that it can't be lotted out. It still must be protected, even if it's on a private lot. The other point I wanted to make is the way this option is set up, with no density bonus, the developer's going to look at it and say, I can get 40 houses and sell them on a 2-acre lot, or I can get the same 40 houses and sell them on a 1-acre lot and keep the other open space. Who's gonna wanna sell a 2-acre lot? Who's gonna get more money? So, you're gonna have to incentivize this cluster development if you want a developer to buy into it, literally, because he can make more money just by going with the buy right development.
That's what it's objective is.
That's why it's in business.
So, I think based on our very first meeting and the conversations we're having, I think that would probably benefit from its own discussion strictly on the conservation subdivision design, because it's so different than what we have. It's not a matter of splitting our commercial existing district into 3 subsections. This is a whole new way of planning that we don't currently really use, and would be different than what we're currently exposed to, which is the PRD.
Right, and so if the township decides to keep the conservation subdivision design, then the draft ordinance would stay as is. If the township decides to not keep the conservation subdivision design, we would revert the R1, we would just take the conservation design out. But the PRD would revert back to how it is as an option in whatever districts it's permitted in now.
And I guess the
If that's what
question
you want.
for
So I would
that,
imagine if you don't want this conservation design, you would want the PRD to be.
and I guess the question for that section would be, are there any current issues with how the PRD is set up? And this, if there aren't any, and we decide not to go with the conservation subdivision design, then just remove conservation subdivision, put in PRD, and everything else works, unless there was any changes in the PRD that you'd want to change if you decided to remove the conservation subdivision design. But again, I just want to state, like the planning commission, it wasn't we didn't come up with this and say, oh, we want to do this. It was part of the grant, which is how it was exposed to us, so we went through it and had the same questions, and I think, Ellen, you were at some of the meetings, Mike, you were definitely there, where we really spent, I think, a few hours, it felt like talking about the same thing.
Yes.
Because you can really get yourself into a rabbit hole with all of the different concepts and ideas and what's best and what would be best for the township, what would attract development, and it was all different discussions that we were having about this, and there were pros and cons, as there are to everything. There's pros and cons, and which outweigh the other side.
John, do you have any issues with PRDs? Because I know one came through the VOC the past 2 years. So did you see any issues with the PRD and the ordinance as it's written?
I think the PRD ordinance should be looked at, if we're gonna keep that. But I do think the PRD is, I think it's good in our particular township does offer flexibility, and because of the steep slopes, because of the streams, that we wanna protect, it does allow for clustering houses closer together. You can ignore setback lines, you can ignore lot sizes. You still have to protect all the important features. So I do think a BRD does make sense. I think ours is outdated. I don't know how far back it goes. I think we should take a look at it. But I do think it gives you the flexibility and the developer the option to preserve some open spaces that we all say we want.
Thanks, John. I unfortunately. Unfortunately, sorry. And Mike, you're gonna see it twice.
3 times.
Okay, so, that does it. I do have a couple of outstanding questions, updates on data center ordinance. Is there an update? What's the status of data centers? Are you guys, did you?
That is for the April 20th meeting, it will come out to the Monroe County Planning Commission.
Okay, great. Okay, so that's still in the works.
Yes, it is still in the works.
And the historic district, that's an ordinance and an overlay map?
That has already been
That's
enacted.
enacted. Okay, I'll get that to Christina. And then the Saldo, so we had done some work on the Saldo. Once I get with the commissioners and we get this zoning straightened out, and I'll look back at what we did in terms of amendments to the Saldo and make sure it aligns with the zoning. And then I think, John, you did, update on the Saldo, or did you do some updates to it?
We tried to see where there's conflicts or duplications between zoning and Saldo, and we can see what it covers.
Alright, so then I can incorporate that into the Saldo.
Or edit how you see is
Right,
appropriate.
okay,
It was more like we made observations.
okay, alright. Okay, and so then eventually, the zoning and the Saldo would be, if we do in fact amend the Saldo, which I think we will, at least to clear up the inconsistencies, then they would both, I assume, get adopted at the same time so that
Yes.
everything is safe, okay.
Yes.
Alright, I think that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any last comments?
Drive home safe.
Thank you, Joe.
I say it every time.
I know you do, and I
I'll give you
appreciate that.
one.
Oh,
I
shut up.
appreciate that.
Suck it up. So did we decide on our next one?
I think our next one is
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Next-
and then we'll come back after.
I mean, assuming it's the
So
same.
the next one is just with the commissioners.
Okay.
What would the date of that be?
He's a.
Is it? I don't know.
He's done quite.
How do you wanna do that? Alan, how do you want to, do you want to, when do you wanna have these meetings? Amy's just said, do you wanna have them, we were having like fourth Monday meetings with the planning commission and do this, or we can,
I guess it depends how fast the board thinks they can review everything, right? You'll have to send us everything, right?
I think that I'll just continue doing what I've been doing and sending just the pieces that we're going to be looking at, instead of overwhelming you with the
Can
entire.
you send the whole thing? I don't see the big picture. I don't-
So you have